What's up, peeps? It's your man Tron Walker here again. Just letting y'all know how this deck has been going and what kind of changes I've been making. So, I'm sure you guys realize it's been a while since I released my last video. That's mainly because, I've been out there just playing against people, just, trying to get a good feel for how the deck is. So far, I can pull off a turn 4 or 5 win easily. The issue that I'm running into is it seems like the meta in modern got a whole lot faster. And the amount of control decks being played just like doubled. Mainly because of like stuff like a row and just a bunch of, control cards. So because of the whole control factor in modern, it's like it's extremely difficult to play a really fun combo deck. Because it's like you never know when you're gonna be missing that one piece. Even in this deck with Veil of Summer in it, there are instances where I try to counter a spell and next thing you know they counter that spell as well. So it's difficult. Makes me think that Teferi is the only way around it since it forces them to not be able to cast spells on my turn. The only downside with that is it's a planeswalker that's not very interactive with the rest of the deck. Like it protects it and it interacts with your opponents, but it doesn't do a lot for the deck that I'm playing besides, just being able to interact with my opponent. Which quite honestly might be a good thing. But mm, for me, it's difficult to add it in because it doesn't go off with doubling season. And like you guys know, the main point of this deck is to play doubling season, play a planeswalker, and then be able to combo off. So yeah, because that's the case, that's why I haven't put that planeswalker in yet. Alright, I'm gonna just go a little bit over the deck. So with the Jace Architect of Thoughts, I'm sure you guys realize there's less of him in here. He's a great planeswalker, but it's just not interactive enough with my opponent. Like, it's nice when he goes off and then, you could chain 3, 4 Jaces back to back. But it's just not realistic in modern, especially with how fast people are playing. And the majority of the people I'm playing against, they're not people who are playing, you know, fun decks that they came up with on their own. They're playing, top tier decks in modern, which means that 3 or 4 turns and the game is probably over. I think the earliest one was what, like 3 turns? Or my opponent was on the play going into turn number 3. And they had the Devoted Druid combo with the Walking Ballistas, and they were able to go off consistently. Not just go off, but go off consistently. Which, was kind of discouraging for deck builders out there, because it's like, you're going to play something that ends the game in 3 turns. Well, going into turn number 3, because your opponent does not get turn number 3, you get it, and then, you're able to pull off that combo and whatever. Mm, for me, on one hand, it's way better than control, like I say that much, but it doesn't leave a lot of room for interaction. It's like, yes, you could say you won, but did you really win? Or were you just able to get to your combo faster? But yeah, I'm playing it to enjoy the game, so because that's the case, you know what? I don't really care about just winning. Anybody can just win. But we're actually, trying to actually enjoy the game here, so I'm gonna stick with my deck. Well, recently I had someone mention to me that, maybe trying a different mana base besides Tron would be a good idea. And I'm down for the idea. I just, for me, it's difficult because I started off with Burnlands first and Mana Dorks. So with Burnlands and Mana Dorks, everybody bolts the bird on turn one and kills whatever else kind of Mana Dorks you have out there on turn one. So because that's the case, I slowly got away from creatures, and then I started playing Tron, found Oath of Nissa, and I was like, okay, this is something I can probably work with. And then I tried, some of the other Oath cards, but none of them were interactive enough to make it work. So, this is what my final stopping point was, up until this point, anyways. So yeah, I'm gonna stick with this space a little bit longer and see what happens. Like partly I'm waiting for them to release some more planeswalkers that, will actually fit in this deck. Cause I realized some of the ones they've released recently, they've made it to where they don't have game winning ultimate abilities. They're basically static abilities throughout the game. And I think that's kind of intentional because there are not a lot of hate cards on planeswalkers. So because planeswalkers do not have a lot of hate cards, they don't want to make it into its own archetype yet. But that also means that it's something that's not very well prepared for yet. We just have to get a system to, be able to get it out there and it should be able to stand on its own. Which is typically what happens. If the combo goes off, it's normally game over. I think there's one card I played against where somebody said that Eidolon of Rhetoric or something like that, where it made it to where you can only cast one spell per turn. I think that's the one card that I've seen that stopped the combo after it's in play. Or another one saying that players can't search their libraries, but with Tamiyo here, you don't search your library, you just draw cards and then you just, go off. With Nicol Bolas here, you just end the game. So yeah, there's not really a need to go search so much once the combo goes off. But like I said, I think that's only happened once or twice. But yeah, so as far as the changes I've made, I've reduced the number of interplanar beacons. The reason why I've decided to reduce the number is there have been far too many instances where I wanted a forest versus an interplanar beacon. The reason for that is forest can, play my Sylvan Scrying, my Orthonisses. It can be used on somewhat Tameo doubling season. Yeah, also, Veil of Summers. Like if I'm playing Veil of Summers, I don't need to have green mana on tap. So yeah, it seemed like Forest was just the way to go because I get more interaction out of it. I did decide to add one Blast Zone. The reason why I decided to add that Blast Zone is I was playing against somebody who was doing what? Green, white. I don't even know the name, know what the deck's name is. It's like Hate Bears, but it was simpler than that. I don't know if it's the newer version or older version. But either ways, he played one card that's a 2 mana card that says that I cannot cast any spell with mana cost 4 or greater that's a non creature spell. and that locked me out of winning the game. Even though I had doubling season out and the Planeswalker in hand. The only option that I had at that point in time was Liliana of the Veil, and I did not draw it. So because of that, and during that game I was able to go fetch lands, I decided to add in Blast Zone. Since then, Blast Zone has came in handy for me many times. So yeah, I'm definitely gonna keep it in this deck, especially since I already own one copy of the card. Terrarian's still here, just great for added mana. We have Mana Morpho still, Sylvan Scryings. The reason why I have the Sylvan Scryings now is it just gets me to Tron way more reliably than anything else. I guess I understand I can filter a decent amount, but after filtering as much as you can and you end up with two or three power plants, and it's just like, dang. That sets you at least 2 or 3 turns back from your opponent, and with the format being so fast, that's not time that you can spare all the time. And like I mentioned, reduced amount of JCs just because not enough interaction. With the Nahiris, I decided to up the amount of her that's in the deck, mainly because since the format's so fast and she goes off in 3 turns, so as soon as you cast her, you basically set a 3 turn clock on the game unless your opponent can do something to stop her. Or unless you draw Emrakul, unfortunately, since there's only one in this deck. But yeah, you basically set a 3 turn timer as soon as you cast Nahiri. Now I know stuff like, Simian Spirit Guides would make it be able to be a turn faster or on turn 3 more consistently, but I don't think she's enough alone to say that a deck will win just because she's in it. Especially since we're, trying to do the doubling season combo here. Not trying to rely too much on just one specific card. But she has been excellent. Yes, I know I had to take out Ralzarek to, make space. Ralzarek and Liliana of the Veil, which are both excellent cards. Typically, when Liliana of the Veil goes off, she ends the game. The issue that I'm running into though with her, my opponent has time to set up, I have time to set up, I go off, I can take half of their setup, but even with half of their setup gone, a majority of the decks are so consistent that's like they'll have that other half back in 3 turns or 2 turns. And if I just draw Liliana off the Veil and that's it, then I have to wait till I draw another Planeswalker. I don't know how many extra turns I'm giving them to try to set back up. So because of that, I rather just go with the Nahiris and just use their ultimate to get Emrakul out there. And as soon as I swing with Emrakul once, I'm taking 6 of their permanents, which is about half of what Liliana was doing anyway. So because that's the case, just going to go with Nahiri instead of Liliana. Also on that note, I played a hilarious game yesterday. I was playing against somebody and I, got my Emrakul on the board with Nahiri. And then my opponent did a weird chain of combos. He basically tried to play gut shot, and then he countered it with trans. I don't even know the name of the new card. It's a card where if they counter your spell, you could just put a creature from your hand into play. And the card that he decided to put into play was Emrakul. So then with the Annihilator 6 from my end, he had to sacrifice all his other permanents. And then next turn he swung with his Emrakul and then won the game. The reason why I didn't win, I think he had like 26 life or either ways, it was more than 15 life, so he had a little bit of life left, and he was able to swing at me next turn with nothing in play except for an Emrakul, and he won the game. Which, hey, it was some pretty fun games. I think me and that opponent played. He used a couple different types of decks, and for the most part, this deck was able to be, moderately keeping up with him, except for Panza, which is a straight up land destruction, and Blood Moon, and stuff of that nature, which, are all things that Tron absolutely struggles with. So, besides that, though, all the other games were 2-1s. I don't think I had a game where I just didn't win any at all except for Panza. And I think even with Panza, I did end up winning a game out of it. So the deck's not performing bad. I think that was before I made all these changes though, so I'm just gonna have to go through and give it a nice play test again and see how it works. But somewhat still here because she just it's an excellent card, and partly I don't want to feel like I'm getting rid of everything that's fun in the deck. So I'm trying to keep the fun element in here. Like now I'm still able to go out with planeswalkers and get them large amounts of counters, but it's more difficult now, especially with stuff like Ralzark gone. Cause typically if he went off, you were gonna win the game eventually. But just the option of you getting 5 extra turns or up to 5 extra turns is pretty awesome. And hey, just as much as you're gonna be on the edge of your seat trying to see how many of them come up heads, so is your opponent, which makes the game even more thrilling. So yeah, at some point in time, I might decide to add Raw Zark back in. But for now, I just want consistency. And playing this still, it's fun just because I'm able to chain a couple planeswalkers together, and impress my opponents, show them what I've built, and let them know some of the feedback that I've gotten from other people who have helped me with this deck. Like what? Last night I had someone mention to me that maybe I should do hand disruption because that's the main thing that works against their deck. I think me and this opponent played like 3 or 4 different decks. So yeah, he was saying I should do hand disruption. So with hand disruption, I'm looking at things like Thoughtseize and Inquisition, Kozilek's. Since both those are both one black mana cost cards, those I can easily put into my deck. The only issue with that is it would slow me down a little bit more, but I would be able to interact with my opponent before they're able to do anything, which is a huge jump from not being able to interact at all. Like I could do stuff like Path to Exiles, or things that deal direct damage to permanents or creatures or whatever, but it wouldn't hit everything. And I feel like if I was able to put Thought Seizes in this deck, I would be able to hit my opponent's hand, which means, except for lands, nothing would be off limits. So yeah, that's something I'll be considering in the near future. Probably today. It just depends on, how these games are going. Probably to change the deck again. Still have the 4 doubling season, the Dragon God, you know. I feel like he just always will be in this deck. Like 100%. He's just too good of a card not to be in this deck. Not to mention he's basically every planeswalker that I play. Street rates. Um I like them. The main reason why they lower the amount of cards in the deck, like I've said in my previous videos. I am still considering Mishra's Baubles though. The reason for the Mishra's Bauble is it's the same thing as straight rates. It lowers the amount of cards in the deck. I just don't know exactly what I would take out yet. But I'm still considering it. Maybe I would do Terrarians for sure. And then hmm, maybe a Nahiri in the doubling season. It just depends. I'm looking into it though. Still, I think Karn was in main board here before, and now it's Ugin. The reason for Ugin is Ugin just hits a lot more. It's like a board wipe. And, you know, a board wipe can do a huge amount of things for you, especially if you're going against something like elves or something. You know, where you can basically wipe their board and end the game for them if they're not careful. So I decided to put Ugin in here. I did decide to put one on the sideboard. The reason for that is the same thing. You know, just the consistency with being able to board wipe. Karn got put on the sideboard. No, great card, but I feel like one copy of it doesn't do it as much justice as what it should have. Because, you know, if you can consistently on turn 3 drop Karn, you're doing pretty good. At least you're going to be able to, you know, squeeze out one extra turn out of the game almost every time. But for me, with the fast decks that I've been playing against, squeezing out even an extra turn on turn 3 is not necessarily as likely because but at that point in time your opponent has, you know, 3 or 4 different things on the board that are gonna win them the game. So then the only thing that makes sense to, you know, be able to get rid of those things would be Ugin. And that's why I decided to place Ugin in the deck. The Force of Vigors, they've been coming in handy, especially with Panza and a bunch of artifact decks out there. But yeah, because of Panza, yeah, Force of Vigor has been doing me an extremely large amount of interaction with my opponents when it comes to those decks. Like even though I'm still able to pull off the win if they just play a Blood Moon, but then when you start adding a Dampening Sphere and other hate cards for Tron, it's like okay, alright, you know what? Force of Vigor would fit perfectly into the scenario, so that's why I decided to add it. I know there's a Magus card or a card named Magus something that, you know, makes out your non-basic lands into mountains, which means that I would have to find some creature hate. But it's like I mentioned before, since I'm able to, you know, play cards like Thoughtseize and Inquisition Kozilek, since I'm able to play them because they only cost 1 black mana, I think those would be able to hit every single type of card my opponent has. My big thing is I'm trying to get as much experience as possible, and with me gaining as much experience as I can, I will be able to accurately interact with my opponent. So yeah, I'm just, you know, getting in as many games as I can right now. The Veil of Summers, like I mentioned before, the counter decks. The card has been working extremely well for me. The Relic of Progenitus. I haven't really used this card too much, honestly. I know it's an excellent card, especially if you're going against something like Dredge or people that are using counter spells or world control because you're getting cards out of the graveyard Or what? Any of the other creatures that, recently came out that have been using the whole escape feature, where they have to exile, I think it's like 5 or 6 cards from their graveyard in order to stay on the battlefield. And they also have to have, been in the battlefield before they can come to the field. Otherwise, if they play them directly from their hand, they end up, being able to use whatever abilities they have, and then they go to the graveyard. But then, like I mentioned, my opponents can do the whole escape thing where they exile a certain amount of cards and then play that creature that comes back to the battlefield. Abilities trigger again, and this time around it sticks around on the battlefield. So, because that's the case, that's why I decided to put this card in here. The Fountain of Renewals, they are in here still because, you know what, I went out and bought them because, I realized that they're extremely good against burn decks. But now I've come to realize, you know what? Burn is not the only thing in the world right now. And that being the case, I'm gonna have to look for some other sideboard cards that, can guarantee me a longer game. But yeah, this is what I'm working with right now. I am steadily, playing a lot of games, getting a lot of feedback from people, constantly adjusting the deck and the ratios of the amount of cards I have in here. Think there's a calculator that tells you the odds of, being able to get cards and everything. And I'm trying to use that formula a little bit to just, help guarantee me that I'll always get the Tron and I'll always be able to, go off in X amount of turns. But I also have to base that off of how games are going because how my opponents interact with this deck will ultimately decide what I need to do to be able to, be consistent or know for a fact that I'll be able to, make this deck work in X amount of turns. So I'm trying to, play as many games as I can to get that level of interaction from my opponents and get the feedback from my opponents. Because a majority of people that I do play against with this deck, who are, actually brewing their own decks or trying to have fun playing Magic, I end up playing 2 or 3 games with them with different decks that they've built over the time. So because that's the case, they're able to, accurately give me feedback on what they think has to change. But yeah, I appreciate all the feedback I've been getting. You know, want to just thank all of y'all for all the follows, the likes, comments. I know there's a bunch of people here that are subscribed now that are in my Discord that we, talk about decks that we're trying to build or talk about how our games are going. So yeah, that being the case, I appreciate every one of y'all being here. If y'all have any ideas for what I can change with this deck or another deck that I can build, please let me know and I will get right on it. And I will reach out to you if you make yourself available and I'll let you know exactly how the deck's going or how my games have been going. That way, we can get twice as much experience with the deck, which should, guarantee that we get to the same point a whole lot faster. Alright, but until next time, hope y'all keep enjoying Modern. Leave a like if you like this video. Comment if you see something that I could change. If I sound like I'm tired, I've been up pretty much all night just playing games, just getting that feedback. But you know what? I enjoyed it, which is why I'm up right now doing this video. And I'll probably get in some more games in today. Alright, so I will see you all later.